here knows me, so there's not really much introducing to do because I'm Deidre Reitav. In 2014, I won the Dr. William Henry Drummond Poetry Contest for my poem, The Rooster. And that is the first poem I'm going to be reading tonight. I figured it's only appropriate to open with that one. And this is actually a story based on events from my childhood. Okay. The Rooster. I always knew when he was behind me. I knew the scrape of wings in the dirt, ready to throw his spurs at me like flicking cooking knives. This rooster that used to herd the hens and own the yard, hovering like a menacing chandelier, eyes the rare color of cantaloupe. Consulting the topography, ready for blitzkrieg, even my blue tick that chased a bear would seek refuge from him under decaying machinery in the skeleton of a truck. His crowing would pull the sun from sleep and bounce off the barn walls. Then this proud chanticleer with his tail like ribbons and dream catchers would move like a mindless surveyor toward the porch, to eat apple peels from a bowl, knock over milk bottles, and chase the night moths from my screen. I would hear nails clicking on the boards like listening to an elemental. I would hear him move away onto the grass to go destroy my tomatoes, rupturing them like soft peeled hearts, leaving a seed-filled carnage over the early morning dirt. But oh, how beautiful he was, his comb red as the stripe on a barber's pole, splayed like fingers and commanding the respect one gives to fire engines. His black tail held the glow of an oil slick with the sheen of dragonflies. His yellow legs pulling at soil and grain, a harvest-worn match to the rusty highland gilt of his body. This rooster that fancied himself an invincible Lucifer, who used to throw his spurs and own the doorstep like arrogant combustion, as if it was his own private brimstone. He found himself reduced one morning, one cold fall morning, the way one reduces fractions and splits wholes into parts. All I found was a handful of russet feathers blowing and clinging to the grass, following the trail of a fox into the woods. This bright flame that I always thought would be snuffed by the blade of my axe on the pitted block by the woodpile, that would grace my table with his autumn fragrance amid sage and apples, went to a different death, by an undertaker with no regard for his beauty, his evil, or the grain he ate, with only one purpose, to ward off the cavernous feeling of belly against spine and the cold hunger of winter. For nature is the greatest humbler, and given time will erode the highest tower. So that's the rooster. That one's, yeah. The pieces I'm starting with tonight are actually sort of pieces that are sort of back to the land. I have other varieties in my poetry, but I figured it was appropriate to probably open with those pieces. And the next one is actually my most requested poem. Everywhere I go, everyone's like, "Can you read Old Truck Up on the Ridge?" And it's an ode to, there is an old truck up on the ridge behind my farm. And it was the basis for this. I added my own embellishments about maybe what it was. So my next poem is called To an Old Truck Up on the Ridge. Before you, there was the gypsy wagon. As the sun set on you, the sun sinks on you. As the sun set on him, the sun sets on you another day. You sit heavy as oak, a steel anchor, earth-colored as faded creosote and wet rope, absorbing the dying rays on the maple-lined ridge that watches my farm. With shattered glass that has seen 60 years, you are an illuminated coffin collecting seasons, gathering samples from passing years. Peering in, I'd almost expect the leaves on your seat to have numerals of date. Bird bones in the glove box, nest on the steering wheel, the rusted key a silenced cat locked from its purr. I feel you as a worn-harbored ship on my hill that you sailed up the logging road and lay like a brown feather in the grass when the sadness of the afternoon slept there. Your rusty ghost mourns the low of cattle at dawn and a skittering of baled wire on your flatbed. Running down the road, comet tail of farm dust ablaze as a torch with your load of pumpkins. The wheels have sunk as the low dying note of a dark cello, No longer the tempo of violins feeding on the energy of wind, or the music generated by the hum of rubber on road. Your lights forever toward the east, you watch me far from this granite ridge, and I feel your mechanical soul yearns for a run through the grain field. That longing, broken gaze, all heart but failed body as if from a decrepit matador or aged fireman, seized but still knowing all the steps. You haunt the hill, eerie as a battlefield shell when the night lightning comes. Unflinching as a black monastery, you're all lines and eye sockets in the blinding voltage. A thrush fights with himself in your one old mirror, a residue of shinier days. When you smiled by the porch, Richthofen red, happy as a pomegranate, driving carefully so the canned cream does not turn to butter, dusty from granaries and sawmills, happy in your work. Or hurtling as a rocket flame sluiced with water loaded with barrels when the neighbor's barn burned the year of the drought. You a great chilled meteor as burning hair and burning hay clouded the August constellations. Now monk-colored and lichen-speckled you sit anchoring the ridge, flaking into the soil of this farm year after year. As a half-burned log in a room of ashes, your beauty is strange like old hunting horns and harness, a heavy steel nebula of star-spangled memories. As you go into dream time, I think you are a book about a laborer's hands, a volume of dusty people with their palms to the ground and eyes to the sky. Little by little, the salt of the seasons pulls you into the earth and dismantles your skeleton, lulls you to sleep as my wood smoke drifts up to your ridge. I'll sit on your flatbed a while in the autumn before snowfall's eyelashes close on you and think how you would love a run over newly mown hay. So that's Old Truck. This is a phenomenal speaking voice to some well-written stories and Catholic poetry. It's Gary.
You didn't say what a nice chap I was.
Yeah, he is.
How you doing, everybody? Glad to be here. I'm going to attempt something a little different, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about cowboy poetry. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it. Excuse me. But it's big out west and all down through the Midwestern states, and they have big jamborees, and I've met a lot of really wonderful people on the internet. I've never met any of them really, and a lot of them award-winning writers, the same as Deidre, and gave me their work. One guy sent me a book, and we recorded some of them. And there's different. P.W. Conway is from. I'm going to do one of his today. I love his work, and he's from California. Magwa Mawini, we've done 3 for her. She's a super little gal in BC, and she's wrote and will run awards all over. We just finished one for her on Audie Murphy, and I forget 150 or 60 clicks or something on it the first day and a half or something, 2 days. It's really gone over well, and the American Memorial Society or something, I believe it is, for Audie Murphy, which was the most decorated soldier in the Second World War. And they really blew it up nice, how nice it was. Roger Turner, Woody Woodruff, we've done 2 or 3 of his, he's a great guy. And Mark Munza, and Jeff McKay, which is another Canadian boy, he's out in Winnipeg. And just a great writer and a great guy, and they go out and have a lot of fun. Hi out there, guys, if you're listening or looking. Why? Little gal here wants one. I think we'll do one. I got one here that I wanted to do for years. Now, I've only been doing this a couple years, and I always had one in my dad's scrapbook. And it was what we used to do when we were kids. And on Saturday night, we'd sit around on the circle in front of him. That's a long time ago. And he would read this to us. Where it came from, I have no idea. Different ladies, including Deidre, knowledgeable poets, have commented on the word structure. I presume the word structure means the way the words are put together. but it is, it sounds impressive to me, word structure. But, and we have no idea where it came from or where it was written, or it was pretty, took a while to get it copied out, but I kept the original copy. So I've traced it back well over 100 years. I was an older brother, and he's 90, and Dad read it to him, and he remembered it well, so we're going back from there. But they talk about the 1890s, and so it goes back quite a ways. One chance in 1,000. What makes my hair like silver at the age of 38? That's a story, stranger, that I seldom relate. For the horror of those moments, I never shall forget, and when I think about them, why, I shudder even yet. It happened back in the 90s, and Billy, who's now 10, as strong as the branch of a hickory, was a little shade of them. Just a rollicking ball of mischief who laughed in childish glee, and ever I tickled his dimple or bounced him on my knee. That season I well remember. We were cramped down at the bend, and where the timber line commences and the walls of the canyon. Just a cozy homemade party. You shall see well, Billy and Billy's mother and her brother George and me. The gorge there, you remember, is fully half-mile wide, and a tangled path winds through it to the ledge on the other side. And then the ledge leads outward, a steep, uncertain trek, out through the head of the canyon to the timber farther back. That morning I well recall that we was loafing around the camp. There'd been a mountain shower, and the air was chilling then. Too cold for the long excursion that we planned to take, far up the side of the mountain to the rim of a rock-bound lake. So we idled away the hours in various kinds of play, and not one of us had noticed why Billy slipped away. Till the call was made for lunch, and we'd all gathered around, and nothing there but Billy. Billy couldn't be found. We searched the side of the mountain, the trails that led to the plain, and we searched the high and low for Billy, but searching seemed all in vain. Then we climbed the edge of the canyon on the thickets of dense mesquite, and there in the yielding surface were the prints of his tiny feet. But they led out again from the tangle, a meager bit of a trail, and less plain it vanished, at last in the shelving shadow. And then we counseled together, perplexed and at a loss, until the wife looked over the canyon and quietly pointed across. We followed her gaze from the tangle, and there at last we spied the figure of little Billy on the opposite mountainside. He was trudging along the mountain, a resolute sort of a chap, one hand thrust into his pocket, and the other he swung his cap. I glanced at my wife and noticed that her lips were moving then, and she reached out her arms towards Billy, far across the room. Then she uttered a scream of terror, and her face went deathly white, and I looked where she was pointing. I'll never forget that sight. For there in that narrow pathway from its cavern on the hill crept a ravenous mountain lion straight towards Little Bill. There was nothing intervening the course of my gaze to bar, and there in those higher levels to the vision carried far. I'll never forget the picture, through centuries onward roll, and the horrors it presented, and burned in my very soul. The beast that was angrily lashing its tail from side to side, the horrid fangs that glistened, the jaws that were open wide. While suspecting Little Billy trudged along the trail, straight towards the beast that waited to rend him tooth and nail. I stood transfixed with terror, but my wife with ready wit caught up the long-range rifle and sprang to my side with it. She quickly measured the distance as near as the eye might see, and then climbed the sights a trifle and handed the gun to me. I knew my hand was shaking, so I passed it on to George, and he pointed with trembling fingers at the scene across the gorge. For years we'd camped together. I'd yet to see a man whose eye was truer, a shot more straight than he. But he passed the gun back, saying, "This shot belongs to you. There's only one chance in 1,000. God grant that your aim is true." The monster was creeping closer, and I felt the cold sweat start, and a hand with icy fingers kept closing around my heart. An awful spell possessed me, and none most o'er me stole, and I couldn't move the finger to save my very soul. And the cat crept nearer and nearer, a sinewy, furious thing. I saw it measure the distance, and I saw it prepare to spring. I think my heart stopped pounding, and I stood there palsied mute, till I heard a voice somewhere, "For God's sakes, Henry, shoot." Then a cry awoke my senses, and the wheels of action caught, that brought the gun to my shoulder, and I fired as quick as thought. Then the mist crept over my vision, and everything went dark, and I had no knowledge of whether or not I'd hit or missed my mark. But I plunged into the canyon, and I ran for years and years through tangles of apprehension and torrents of surging fears. And running, I prayed that somehow it might be the will of Him that maketh the sparrow shall rescue my little bit. And at last I saw him, the little fellow sat, with his chubby fist entangled in the fur of that monster cat. And he talked in childish prattle, and I heard him chiding say, "That great big naughty kitty, why didn't he come to play?" Then he cried when he last saw me, "Oh, Daddy, I'm so glad you've come. I was hunting for you and Mama, but I guess I lost it some. But I found this nice big kitty just coming to play with me, but he can't play now, Daddy, because something hurted him." I took him out and I bore him with all his childish charms, and across the glen and laid him safe back in his mother's arms. And though she fondly kissed him, I could not help but see that her gaze was not on Billy, but was riveted on me. Keenly she looked upon me, and though she didn't speak, I noticed the tears were springing, stealing down her cheek. Then she brought a tiny mirror and held it before my eyes. And then I looked within it, I started in sheer surprise. For what I saw reflected in unrelenting truth was a crown of fourscore winter above a face of youth. My hair in those few moments had changed, it was even so, from as dark as the raven's feather to as white as the new-blown snow.
A couple years ago, I got really, really sick and ended up in the hospital. And this actually is a poem that was written based on a near-death experience. I don't know if anyone or you know anyone who's ever come to that place, but it's a strange place to be. I'll tell you that much for sure. So this poem came as a result of it. It's called The Journey of White. In the darkest hour of my life, I took a journey through the lightest shade. I drifted away to it as a shadow's echo, my life uncleared with marred edges like a hand behind a lampshade. The world became blinding like the blast of a star, the deep white heart of supernova. Railroad flare bright, surgical room cold. A pale road with a starkness and bite of salt led me to places where my hands faded and I even tasted white. Like being in a room where someone is carving ivory and piano keys, the anemic dust filling the air. So this is white, a white line limbo between death and living, a Lapland winter place, a holding cell for souls, full of underwater echoes, hush of snow, albinos glimpse and sugar pile. Even my voice came back to me echoing pale, like the crack of November ice lens in troughs. Death white, bloodless like bones, I thought of it mixing with gray, a slab of marble, heavy-boned mantles and weather-harassed skulls. I stood there with white feet, not flesh but energy, and I thought I must be made of purity, like white birds of peace in the sun, smiles and newly painted dovecotes. And that if I sang, the voice would be clear and charged, and acetylene voice high like the joint of an icicle. It would travel up to the heavens as beads or mist, sponge brush cloud. It would drip down as sunlit rain from a swan and be stored on display like the smiling half-moons in the bed of fingernails. I heard a beautiful male voice saying white, and angel feathers fell into my palms. A bride smiled, then organ music, then casket lilies. An oppressive smell like the reek of stamens, winter steam from the nose of a funeral horse. Someone's sad white memories and overexposed pictures. I closed my eyes and ran, and under me became moon-scarred seascape, foam from rock-battered water, cooling and languid white that suddenly turned hot like the whiteness beyond red in a forge. Was it dead? I did not know. The white was moving me, and I became an icy lathe, turning up cold cauldrons and soapstone heartbreak. Something brushed my face. Was it a flag of surrender, cabbage moth wing, swirls of astral alchemy? My soul pulled in the sound of an icy violin, and white showed me how it turns, rears, and wheels, in the fright of a horse as its eyes roll upwards. Sawed-off tusk and deep bone-bearing bite. Oh, the many faces of white, frightening and pure as if someone was pounding a piano. Snowy owls screech and birches peeling sadness. I felt like I needed something to do, that I could pass a white fence arrogant with matching dog, to seek out places that sold vanilla or lye, chipped porcelain, and shark's teeth. Or I'd feel the dread of whitewashing the barn and could reward my senses instead with a vision of Loon's white necklace, of tin-punched sky showing me Orion, Dipper, and Pegasus, white tattooed holes in the dark night. Here I must nourish myself with white while I wait, towering glass of milk, bread and rice, marzipan fingers, even food has ghosts. Church candles and prayer flames, talc on wet skin, the smell and feel of muslin and summer's bleached sheets. I was walking into that albino sunset of white, when I felt earth air move into my lungs and saw the colors of life, and no longer the corridor of white, where you pace as a soul with no body, hoping you will get it back.
I want to do, there's another one here, P.W. Conway. Nice guy, and his father died of Alzheimer's. And he tells a story of it here. And it's a little more cowboyish. I parked my truck behind the barn and made my way toward the house. And as I walked up the path, I saw no man in his house. He sat there upon his porch, his hands was old and weathered. His face was grizzled by the sun, and it looked like saddle leather. His fists, they clenched the rocking chair as it moved slowly to and fro. Behind these blurry eyes were memories that he may never know. I could tell that he was staring at something far away, and it could have been his past or the distant fields of hay. I wondered what he saw out there, or was it another place or time, or just a cool colored image that made no sense or rhyme. The woman sitting next to him got up to go inside. She smiled as she brushed away a tear she tried to hide. He strained his eyes and looked at me, and I wondered who he was. The expression on his face was enough to give me cause. I said, "My name's Robert." He said, "My name's Robert too." He stuck out that old weather hand and said, "How do you do?" "Do I know you, young fella? Have you been this way before?" I said, "Yes, sir, a time or two to help out with the chores." I wanted him to talk to me, so I looked at him and said, "Why don't you tell me what it's like out here on the spread?" He said, "We're all ranching folks. Are you a rancher too?" I said, "I work my share of cows, but not near as much as you." I said, "I ain't sure just how I started. I can't recall, but I've been a rancher all my life. I guess I've done it all. Cowboy's life ain't easy. It's hard and lonely too. It takes every ounce of strength you got just to do what you gotta do. And just when you catch your breath and you think the chores are done, you realize there's more work to do beyond the setting sun. Cowboys ain't for the weak of heart or for them that ain't gonna try, or just can't quit and walk away. You'll keep the ranch till you die. Did I mention I'm a rancher up here? That's what I do." I said, "Yes, sir, you did. And I'm a rancher too." I guess that it don't matter. I'm forgetful now and then, but I'm proud you came on by, and I hope you'll drop by again. I'd like to sit and visit, but I've got work to do. This old place don't run itself, so I'll say good day to you." He just went back to his staring out with his little sheepish grin, and I wondered if he'd recall the time I spent with him. I knew I had to walk away, and it made me kind of sad. I turned my back and whispered, "You know, I love you, Dad." Thank you very much. I love them tearjerkers. I love making ladies cry. Deidre.
Poem where I focus on sort of lyricism and imagery. And it goes out to all the folks out there that have red hair. Any red-haired folks, anyone you know who has red hair? It's an ode to red hair. Hair with coppery lament, hair resounding with the pallet or drum beats of deep autumns. Sparking like cinders from blacksmiths and forges, the flare from a flintlock, red hair recoils like a rifle. It speaks loudly with intelligent arrogance or softly like firelight under the crack of a door. Skin with ivory blood translucent with blue-veined watermark, or freckled umber paint drops a killdeer's egg. Red ochre and opium ox blood, red hair speaks of sunsets and smelting, of things that are coppery and sanguineous, blood in a vial clustered sumac or war paint. If it could sound, it would be pitchy torches at night, the collapsing of embers giving up ghosts under charred logs, the thrum of hillside bagpipes. Red hair can be silent and standing but definitely there, or bowed and colored like Flanders. It can give up a battle cry, the discarding of kilts and the scrape of broadswords. It may have the appeal of condemned souls. When I speak of red hair, it is in the same beauty as glow from a distant fire, of climbing the crest of a dark hill to the waiting hearth on the other side, the way sun runs through Bordeaux against a south-facing pane. When I touch red hair, I expect my hands to come away, smelling like forging Vulcan and hammers. I would smell beauty with a likeness to maple leaves gone to graves, or kitchens heavy from the gathering of cloves and cinnamon. I would see a woody olfactory funeral, a pyre in the night, the felling of red cedar and cherry, cardinal fragrant motes drifting on a shaft of light as a departing spirit. Great-grandmother had red hair, violent red hair. They called her torch because they knew no way to capture it. For red hair is lava through the mind, the joy of a flame. It fills a dark space and is the surrendered state of metal. It is Thor and a Valhallan afterlife cheer. My ode to red hair is this. Red hair has power, the power of collapsing seasons and huge red cauldrons that feed an army. It has a ghostly lilt with the depth of locks, the power of harvest moons and the call to the reaping and culling. It holds all the strength of fever and lifeblood, standing as a Celtic cross against the sky, whispering of ingested summer and the heartbeat of clan. So that's for all you red-haired folks out there.